Since Nickelodeon just announced an entire new division dedicated specifically to Avatar content run by Michael Dante DiMartino and Bryan Konietzko, I decided to make a list of my top 10 favorite episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Keep in mind that this is just my opinion, there is no objective best or worst. Also, there are way more than 10 fantastic episodes of this show. I could do a top 20 or a top 30 and I still wouldn't be able to include them all. As a result, there are many great episodes of the series that did not quite make the cut. I wish I could squeeze every great episode of this show into a top 10 list, but I can't. Also, since the series has many 2 or 3 part episodes, I combined a lot of them into one episode just to make it easier. Without further ado, let's get started. At number 10 is The Puppet Master. This is probably the most disturbing episode of the series. It really goes to show that people from other nations can be just as awful, if not worse, than the Fire Nation. And it features probably the best episodic villain of the series. On top of that, it introduces a new type of bending, which is cool. And 2, it sets up a very morally gray conflict that Katara will have to go through later in the series. At number 9 is The Siege of the North. This is a great finale to Book 1. It has lots of good action, some emotional resonance, and wraps up all of the character arcs really well. I love how this episode sets Uncle Iroh apart from the rest of the Fire Nation. It really shows how compassionate and caring he is. It also really builds up the relationship between Zuko and Aang. Zuko opens up to Aang, and Aang ends up showing some compassion for Zuko. This episode also gives Admiral Zhao a fitting end to his character arc, and once again shows Zuko's potential for forgiveness. Plus, we get to see Aang enter the Avatar state, which is always awesome. Number 8. Appa's Lost Days. This is debatably the most depressing episode of the series. It gives Appa a surprising amount of character development. It really makes the audience feel sorry for him as he desperately tries to find Aang. It also really dives into the bond between Aang and Appa and shows that they have a really unique and special connection. It once again reinforces how evil Azula is, and sets up a lot of important moments for later in the season. Number 7. The Firebending Masters. This is a very important chapter in the arcs of both Aang and Zuko. This episode solidifies their friendship and really teaches them both an important lesson. Aang realizes that fire is not necessarily the element of destruction, but the one of passion and energy. Zuko realizes that anger is not always the best motivator and that allowing devotion and dedication to drive him is less self-destructive. This episode also adds a lot of interesting lore to an already pretty inventive mythology. On top of that, it might have the most beautifully animated sequence in the entire series towards the end. Number 6. The Day of the Black Sun. This episode was kind of set up as the series finale, but instead subverts that and is a solid midpoint. This episode has some great action. The fight on the Fire Nation shore this show's the Battle of Helm's Deep. However, the action is contrasted with some really good character moments, particularly for Sokka and Zuko. We see Sokka struggle to maintain his composure as an entire army looks up to him, gain it as he leads the charge, and then lose it again when Azula mentions Suki. This episode also has the moment that fans have been waiting for since the storm. Zuko tells his father off and decides to join the gang.
After I leave here today, I'm gonna free Uncle Iroh from his prison, and I'm gonna beg for his forgiveness. He's the one who's been a real father to me. But I've come to an even more important decision. I'm going to join the Avatar, and I'm going to help him defeat you.
Really?
At number 5 is The Chase. This episode really manages to blend action and character really well. All of the character moments really work, like the friction between Toph and Katara, showing Zuko's potential for good, and the conversation between Toph and Iroh. That being said, the action is also fantastic. It's creative, unique, and allows us to see all 4 elements work together for the first time. This episode begins by establishing a sense of tension that builds and builds and builds until it climaxes in an explosive final action scene. Number 4. The Crossroads of Destiny. This is an excellent season finale. Like just about every episode of the show, it balances action and character really well. The conversation between Katara and Zuko is central to the arcs of both characters, as is the conversation between Aang and Iroh. Once again, the action is fantastic. The Aang and Katara vs. Zuko and Azula fight is great, and the scene where Zuko attacks Aang is shocking. This ends a perfect middle chapter to the series and really is the Empire Strikes Back of this franchise. Number 3. Zuko Alone. This is debatably the most important episode in Zuko's arc. It feels like a Clint Eastwood-esque action drama with a morally gray main character and a tragic ending. This episode really dives into his character psychology and why he is the way he is. It also fleshes out the relationship between Zuko and Azula, pointing out all of the dualities between them. Finally, it foreshadows his potential for good, but also foreshadows his potential to betray those that abandon him. Number 2. The Storm. This episode is the one that proved that this series was going to be much more than just a straightforward children's cartoon. It was going to have layered characters, a complex storyline, and real-world themes. It really manages to highlight the duality between Aang and Zuko, with the hero being born out of a selfish act while the villain was born out of a selfless act. It sets up most of the characters' arcs in one way or another. There are no shortage of video essays about this episode on YouTube. I really can't say that much about it that hasn't already been said in one way or another. Before I talk about my number 1 pick, here are some honorable mentions.
The boulder feels conflicted about fighting a young, blind girl.
Sounds to me like you're scared, Boulder.
The boulder's over his conflicted feelings.
Little soldier boy, come marching home. Brave soldier boy comes marching home.
Need a hand, old friend?
Sozin?
At number 1, everyone knew this was coming, is going to be Sozin's Comet. This is an excellent series finale. It ties up all of the plot lines, character arcs, and themes so perfectly. The battle between Aang and Ozai is awesome. It perfectly shows off each character's respective powers as well as their moral code. Ozai is trying to kill Aang and does not care how much destruction he causes in the process, while Aang refuses to kill Ozai. The battle in the hot air balloon also shows off Sokka, Toph, and Suki's strengths. Of course, I have to talk about the last Agni Kai. Seeing Azula have a full-blown mental breakdown is one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen in a kid's show. The final scene with all of the main characters is pretty much perfect. It's so emotional I can barely even talk about it. As Toph says,
Perfect.
So yeah, that's it. That's my list. Let me know in the comments below, what are y'all's favorite episodes of Avatar? I'm working my way through Legend of Korra right now. When I'm done with that show, I'm going to try to do a top 10 episodes of that show, a ranking of all 7 seasons, and maybe a ranking of the heroes and villains. If you guys really insist, I'll do a video talking about how bad the M. Night Shyamalan movie is, but as you know, we all know there is no M. Night Shyamalan movie. All in all, I really hope that the new Avatar content is good. I can't wait for the new movie, and I'm really happy that it's going to be released in theaters. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Bye.